We're live. Yay.
Right on. Awesome. Hi, guys. Thank you so much for joining us, panelists and viewers who are watching. My name is Kai Walsh. I am the founder and owner of Kai Consulting. I'm also a digital marketer and entrepreneur. So yeah, essentially, this is our 5th Pride chat of the series with the Center on Colfax. We have a really awesome panel lined up for you guys. And yeah, so my pronouns are they, them, and this chat is on action. So what we're talking about is essentially how we can hold brands accountable and help our allies be better allies for the queer community. So with that said, I'm going to pass it off to John, who can introduce himself. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. My name is John White, and I use he, him pronouns. I am the events director at the Center on Colfax. And this has been quite an amazing project that we have been working on with Kai. Thank you so much. During this Pride season, we know that so many things have been happening in the world, not only just with the pandemic, but with a lot of different movements that have been happening as well in the Black Lives Matter movement. So I'm excited to hear everyone's kind of point of views on what's been happening and how we can make things better and make it more inclusive, and how to, like Kai said, hold brands accountable and not just get our gay dollars during Pride, and how do we continue supporting organizations that support us all year long.
Yeah, awesome, great. And so now we'll just go through and you guys can introduce yourselves and then just say your pronouns, what you do, and then, kind of your why you're on this call, what you want to get out of this chat. Yeah. And so Marv, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Marvyn Allen. I'm the Health Equity and Training Director with One Colorado, and my pronouns are they, them, and he, him. And I'm just really excited that I was invited to be here. I do a lot of work in the health equity space, and I'm definitely excited about taking a lot that I know about that space as well as the policy space to add to the conversation. And One Colorado's had some really exciting policies passed this year that just had the bill signing for on Monday. So excited to talk about some of those. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, that's awesome. We can't wait to hear about some of that stuff. Yeah. And Denym, go ahead.
All right. Hi, my name is Denym. I use they, them pronouns. Right now I am unemployed, but I am an artist on the side. So that's kind of where I'm getting most of my income right now. Before that, I did work for Planned Parenthood of the Rocky Mountains at the only site that did gender affirming care. I think what I really want to get out of this conversation is how we can reflect and be better as white queers. I think there is a huge issue in our community with racism, and it goes untouched because I feel like a lot of white label us as minorities just because we're queer. It doesn't demolish our white privilege as a white queer. So hopefully I can get some more, advice or more reflective tools on how I can be better as an ally to my fellow Black queer community members.
Right on. Yeah, awesome. Thanks for sharing. And we have Blair. Hi, Blair. How's it going?
Good.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So I guess mine is probably several-fold. I'm a community organizer in general, so I like to know what's going on. And then I'm a designer and an illustrator and an artist, and I'm really interested in housing and where activism intersects with design. So I work with a lot of campaigns that are happening. I'm probably going to work on the anti-abortion campaign that's about to happen, stuff like that, digital organizing stuff. And then I have a brand called Office of BS, and the target market is basically queer and trans people. So it's pronoun pens and apparel and things. So yeah.
Awesome.
Wonderful. Yeah. Well, thank you all for being here today. This is going to be really exciting. And is everyone ready just to dig right in? Yeah. All right. Fabulous. So one of the first things that I wanted to kind of ask everybody collectively as a group, it's really interesting because we're coming out of what we in the queer community consider to be Pride season. However, Pride is every day. So I would be interested to know how you feel that folks are dealing with, or how folks are really coming up with that real intersection of the Black Lives Matter and Pride, and how unique and powerful that piece is. And I would just love to get your perspective on what you have been experiencing throughout this Pride Month, on how that all has evolved and where you find that we should be better allies. Who wants to go first? Anybody?
I don't mind getting us started.
Okay.
I think that that's a really great question, because I felt a difference during, this phase of the movement for Black Lives after the death of George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd, and it, having this intersection in our lives with Pride, but also this pandemic that we're going through. I immediately felt a difference, and I don't think it's yet enough of a difference, but it's definitely something that's hopeful. And I think it speaks a lot to what Denym was talking about too, with the LGBTQ community really realizing that we need to be allies in this with the movement for Black Lives and Black Lives Matter. And we have gained a lot through Pride. It was a realization this year that some people, I think, never had, that the first Pride was a riot.
Yeah.
And that was really powerful. I mean, even as I say that now, like, it's still very powerful. And I think that, the LGBTQ community as we are today, seeing that and realizing that, and then also at the same time living through this virus pandemic that's having so many throwbacks in our hearts and minds to the AIDS epidemic of the 80s, and just like this fear of what it can do and the power that government and policy can have in our lives and in protecting us and keeping us safe, healthy, and alive. And it's been really powerful. I know even at One Colorado, we've had a lot of internal conversations about, not just like what others should be doing, but what we need to do differently. Mm-hmm. How can we grow from this? An organization that I feel and very, I wanted to come into because of the work that they do and the diversity that they promote. And then, to have that feeling of all of us together saying, we're still not doing enough. Let's do more. Let's be active about doing more. And that's been really powerful. And so I do think that that's different this time around.
And really quick, can you give some examples of, what you mean by how you guys have been changing?
Yeah,
what
absolutely.
You're doing differently? Yeah.
Yeah, well, one, we're having more conversations, right? Which I think is the first step, having a whole lot more conversations and really calling out anti-Blackness in a way that we've never talked about before. Really, honestly, that I've never talked about before in any of my circles, and being much more aware of it, and not just more aware of that it's happening, but more aware of like our role in it. I actually, early on, we did send out a letter, which a lot of organizations were doing, and I firmly believe that words aren't enough. But part of that letter was also many of our staff and our organization had been down to the protests and were participating. And so it's a reality that the work that we do, it's because of our lived experiences, and our lives are going to keep intersecting there, and our values and our beliefs. And we're not really doing the LGBTQ movement justice if we ignore the movement for Black lives, because that intersects every day, all day for some people. We also supported things like Senate Bill 217, the Enhanced Law Enforcement Integrity Bill that Leslie Herod really championed and got through. And the work that Tay Anderson has been doing with Denver Public Schools before this around gender neutral bathrooms, and now with getting police out of Denver Public Schools, and really focusing a lot of our Pride time around actually our spending our time with the movement for Black lives. Pride this year was different, and we shifted gears and we put a lot of our time and efforts behind how do we show up for this community.
I love that.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else like to share?
I think personally and via my business, where I've been focusing a lot of my efforts is city level work. So really getting to know the city council and the policies they're creating and how that interfaces with the mayor, and kind of lobbying the city council for certain things. But you know, I'm just of the mindset that, like, you know, none of us are free until all of us are free, and intersectional justice and liberation is crucial for all of us, I think. And so, yeah, I think just trying to figure out for myself and my business where those intersections lie and like where my strengths lie. And I learned when the George Floyd stuff started kicking up that it's apparently easy for me to be the conduit for like fiscal donations or like supplies and stuff. So utilizing that kind of role more as like a connector and redistributor and things. So yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Mhm.
How about you, Denym?
Yes, let's see. Okay, cool. I was trying to get myself unmuted here. I would say for the most part, what I've been doing, being a former employee of Parenthood and have a lot of extra that I can just give to organizations like I wanted to. So what I've started doing is I've been making art, and when people pay me for the art, instead of getting the money and taking it for myself, I've been donating to organizations like Black Lives Matter, Marsha P. Johnson Foundation, Black Trans Futures. I've just been trying to do as much as I can with the skills I have. I think it's important, you know, if you can't donate, can you volunteer your time? If you can't donate, can you go and stand and protest? If you can't do those things, what can you do? Just take your skills and apply it and somehow to help with what's going on with the movement is kind of what I've been trying to do. Another thing I've been trying to do is look where I'm at with my artwork, where I'm being showed at, and see, are there Black artists also being shown? Mm-hmm. And I feel like in the art community, there's not enough, especially in the queer community. I feel like Black artists are underrepresented. There's just not enough art in our spaces by Black queers. And I think, you know, take for example, the bars that we have, you know, Blush and Blue, or the queer spaces we have in Denver, where's the Black artwork at? It's not being represented because they don't see themselves being represented in the community altogether. I've been trying to really take initiative, as if someone asks me if they can have a piece in their storefront or in their business, I always ask them, well, are you showing Black art too? It's something small that I've been trying to be more active about, but it's something that I've really am passionate about. So I've been trying to be more on top of it. So yeah, that's my main things I've been doing. I definitely need to do more. With that being said, especially since I'm not employed right now on a 9-to-5, I would definitely, like what Blair's doing, get involved with city council more, make more efforts towards being there and being present for that, because, you know, I don't feel like, you know, you can post on social media, but if you can physically show up there and show a face behind what you're saying, I feel like it's more powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I agree completely with what everyone's touched upon. It's amazing how we as a community, it took something so horrific to bring everyone to this point where we're at right now, where we're all thinking a little bit differently. We're taking our own white privilege and thinking about, wow, I never thought about that. You know, we've not grown up in those situations or been forced into those situations because of the color of our skin. So now we have to shed light on that. And I love to hear that, you know, all the different and creative things that are coming out of this. But for me, it's always like, well, why hasn't it always been that way? You know, and that's when you're involving businesses and you're talking about your art, and it's like, well, why haven't they been, you know, talking to other types of people to do the art as well? And I love that you're pushing back and saying, well, are you representative of the Black community? You know, are you representative of the Latinx community? Like, do you have Indigenous art? Like, do you have these other different types of artists that you're also asking? And I find, because we deal with it at the center as well, and I think a lot of that, where it happens is that people don't know unless they advocate for themselves. And a lot of people aren't comfortable doing that. So unless they are recommended to a business to showcase what they have to give, it's harder sometimes to find those people or to help nudge them into putting their, whatever it may be art, it may be music, it may be, you know, anything, a business sense of mind. And so pushing them into the forefront so that they also get recognition like the rest of us do. So I really appreciate you all chiming in for that question, because I think it's important to know where we've been, where we're going, and kind of that's how all the topics are for tonight as well, kind of figuring and guiding through that piece of it of inclusion. I'm going to go on to our next question. So I think it's interesting because we are talking about inclusivity and the pride and taking action. So how for each of you have you fostered to be more inclusive within your professional life, in your personal, and also when you're out in the community, just, you know, well, obviously we're in a pandemic, so you're not out in the community, but, you know, maybe you're at a backyard barbecue, socially distanced with people. And how are you having conversations, or how are you just fostering a more inclusive mindset now? Anybody? Don't be shy. Get a little closer. Well, I can talk a little bit about it first. So my other full-time job is also being a drag entertainer in Denver. And so it's also come up in conversation backstage and on social media, which I'm beginning to really hate, and all these types of things. And, you know, I had a wonderful conversation with one of my drag sisters a few weekends ago, and, you know, and she happens to be Black, and I simply started asking questions because I'm a very inquisitive person. I'm like, I want to help the movement. Yes, I'm able to donate and I'm able to help in that. I'm able to go and show up at the protests. I'm able to be a voice, but you tell me what would be most helpful for me, a white man, to be able to help you, like to help the movement to carry it on over the threshold. And one of the things that have come up on the inclusive side is that, you know, there's this muddiness in the drag community of people, now that the Black Lives Matter movement has kind of happened. I put air quotes around that because it's been going on for 400 years. It's, you know, it's been happening for such a long time, but now that it's in the social media realm, that now it's getting muddied within some of the demands that are being made upon bar owners and restaurant owners to be more diverse, where most have been very good about being diverse in their casts. I'm going to speak on the drag side of things, and people that work there. And it was interesting. She said to me, well, we don't want to cross the two together. We shouldn't be putting Black Lives Matter with an employment situation as far as, you know, inclusivity within the drag shows and things, because she didn't see that as a problem. But I thought that was an interesting kind of mentality to hear from one of my close friends, to figure that out, because I was like, oh, I really need to stop and think about when I'm at a show, like how many people of color are within the show, not just Black and brown, but also Indigenous and, you know, Indian and all different sorts, and finding out, you know, where those lines are. So inclusive for me lately has been speaking up. You know, I'm hearing people having conversations, and it makes me kind of cringe a little bit, but I feel that I have been in this industry for such a long time that I'm done keeping my mouth shut. I mean, I would sit by and be like, well, I don't know if they're going to hire me again. I really don't care anymore. You know, for me, it's about sticking up for my Black friends that now have this elevated voice, and I want to be able to help. So how can I do that? I can listen, and they tell me what they need from me, and then I can become conduit and an advocate for that piece, and take it to the streets, or take it to my family, take it to my friends when I'm in my circles, and start speaking up more. So for me, that's one thing that's come out of this that's really important, is to be more vocal about telling people when they're wrong in conversation, especially when it comes to what's happening now within the Black Lives Matter movement. So I just wanted to share that. Anybody else?
I think, yeah, for me, it's all intertwined, but it's both in my personal life and my professional life. It's just a lot of, I think, small things that end up being larger, when looking at the movement. But like, for me, going to city council meetings and lobbying them for changes in city funding, like where, the city spends so much money on the police and especially payouts of lawsuits. So I don't want my tax dollars going to that. I don't want to pay for like cops killing people. And so, yeah, like lobbying that on a personal level, and also just being able to leverage my business as like having an input in things. And for me personally, I moved to East Colfax in November, and it's basically the next neighborhood that like the city's trying to make Rhino, basically. And so I don't want that to happen because because I'm really passionate about gentrification and housing, and B, like this is the fourth neighborhood I've been in Denver, and like I guess it's been about 6 years. And yeah, it's just rapid gentrification that really affects like our Black population here and indigenous population. And so I've been involved with like the neighborhood association, and then there's like a more radical group called East Colfax Community Collective. And we're basically interfacing with the city to get them to change the plan to be more inclusive, to like have specific like measures to prevent displacement and stuff like that. So I've been learning a lot at meeting with neighborhood groups and whatnot. And something I'm also learning is like a lot of this stuff is like boring, day-to-day meeting shit, but like it's a continual process that builds upon, and you can get to a point where you have a lot of leverage with your white privilege and like just meeting a bunch of people and shit. So like, yeah, just learning how to leverage things and increase that.
Awesome. Thank you.
That's really cool. Yeah. And I think you're definitely right on that. And it's hard for people to know where to start with, how do I get involved more on, in government with, I don't know, different actions and things happening, but how do I get more involved? And what would you recommend for people getting started? Like, how did you get started, Blair? Do you have any recommendations?
Yeah, so I think I moved from Alabama and was very like disillusioned with politics because I didn't really have much of a say there. But realizing how much of a swing state Colorado is, I first started with getting involved with a nonprofit called New Era Colorado, and they registered young people to vote as well as like work on policies that affect young people like student debt and stuff. So that was like my first introduction, and then I've just like dug in a lot more. And like I said, housing is like a big thing for me because I think it's like foundational, and we all know like who homelessness affects, and like trans women of color, like trans youth. So yeah, I think what I've said to a couple people recently is like figuring out like what specific things you're passionate about, because there's going to be an intersection, with people of color and like, racial inequities and whatnot. So, for me, it's housing and queer and trans things. And so for instance, housing, I joined a coalition on like affordable housing called ASAP. And unfortunately we haven't met recently, but and it's made up of a group of organizations that like Interfaith Alliance and whatnot. So it's like, building power through this like coalition building. So yeah, I think the important thing is figuring out like issues that one is passionate about, and then figuring out the players involved.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
And I would like to say, especially like as white queer folks, as you're thinking about getting involved, I think really important challenge that I have faced, that I, asked myself to face recently, is to find those ways that I have contributed to white supremacy. And because I'll speak for myself. I have got, over the years, gotten more and more comfortable and more secure in calling other people out, and then, learning techniques to call people in, and really felt like I was being an ally to the movements that I either belonged to or felt really strongly about. I wanted to create change in. But I think it's really realizing that all white people have been a part of white supremacy. And it's not just benefiting from white privilege, but it's contributing to white supremacy. And so I really challenge folks to, to the point that you can be brave enough today, tomorrow, the next day, continue to walk yourself through that and find those ways, because they are there. And we have to change that within ourselves. We have to be brave enough to see that and to call it out within ourselves and change that. And I agree, like Blair, Blair and Denym, like I adore you both. Like it's lovely to see you on here. And so I know that like when Blair speaks to that Blair is one of those people who have done that work. So it's and continues to do that work, because I see it in their work every day. And so that's definitely not a comment to them, but just it was more of a comment to me, because I think until this year I hadn't fully done that work, and it hurt. It hurt a lot. I mean, it hurts to look at yourself and say that you have been this person, you have been the one in this situation, you have been not only privileging from something, but perpetuating it because you privileged from it. And so that's thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think there is something to be said too about the privilege of being able to, recognize our own privilege within ourselves, and then go out and see how we can leverage that in the world. And sometimes the best thing we can do, aside from taking action and joining committees and organizations and supporting those things as well, but it's going out into the world and being as authentic as you can, and being transparent, and being willing to, show up for people who can't show up safely. I think that's a really big thing, privilege,
It's being willing to have those vulnerable conversations with not only yourself, like Marvyn just said, but also with your friends. Start calling. Yes, we're in this whole cancel culture thing right now. I would rather not cancel somebody, but sit down and have an adult conversation and figure out why they are spewing either the hate or misinformation that's coming out of their mouths, and how can we work together to eliminate it from their vocabulary.
Yeah.
Denym, would you like to share anything?
Yes. Let's see. Okay.
On my end.
100% agree with everything, Marvyn. Yes. Yes, we need to do a lot of self-reflecting work right now and figure out how not only do we have our white privilege and how it presents, but also how we benefit from it and how we're contributing towards the ongoing cycle of systematic racism that needs to stop. It is a lot of hard work to do, and it's not going to be done just like that. I'm here to say I didn't do that internal hard work until recently when all this stuff came up. So I'm at fault for that as well. But it's, it's better late than never to start working on yourself in these ways. I will say one of the things that I've done, that I did before leaving Planned Parenthood, is me and a clinician started a petition to start changing the name from our Stapleton Health Center. We got that name removed and we put it as Park Hill. It took us 2 days. When the institution told us when the institution told us that they've been working on it since 2016, we were like, why hasn't it happened yet? But the one clinician took lead on it, and then we just shared it throughout the whole organization, got everyone's signature on it, and then together as a whole collective, as frontline staff, they got it switched over and got the Stapleton name removed. It's not even on Google anymore, I don't believe. I know it's not on our website anymore, but they stripped the name off of it, and now it's the Park Hill Health Center. Another thing that I brought to attention to our quality management before I left is when we ask demographic questions, there's always that how do you identify your race and ethnicity question. I had problems with it when I started and I mentioned something and nothing happened. So I took the liberty since I was on my way out, and also because of the movement that's going on, I had to bring attention to it. I'm like, they have it as listed as African American or Black. Those are not interchangeable. So I brought awareness to that. Since I left, I don't know if there's been any more work done on it, but I did send an email out to HR, and I also got some other people's ears in on it who were still involved in working in the health centers. So hopefully they are making changes towards that, because it's just, that's another little microaggression that, we don't realize, as white people, like we get to click Caucasian, and it's just, I don't feel like it's right for them to have that listed as like African American or Black, when really it should be African American and then another category is saying Black.
Yeah.
So I really push for them to change that. I have no idea if it's changed or not because I don't have access to that stuff since I'm not there anymore. But this conversation has made me want to follow up with one of my coworkers and see if they have switched it over yet or not.
Right on. Cool. And just kind of circling back to when you were talking about Stapleton Health Center and changing that, what did those steps look like, getting that started, and who started it, and how did you guys get it around and get names on it?
So I don't know if they would feel comfortable with me sharing their name just because Planned Parenthood is kind of controversial, but it was one of our clinicians who has been there a long time at Planned Parenthood. She really was like spearheading it. She drafted the petition, and then we have a work email database that you can send out like all agency emails, and they just sent it out to everybody across all 3 states. So that's 500 plus employees to get them to sign it and really call action to make our HR department switch it over. 2 days passed and they switched it over like that. It was pretty easy in that sense. I don't know if things usually go that smooth or not. But yeah, I think really it was a community-based effort with spreading awareness, especially talking about it in our health centers. No one was okay with that name for, like, at least I know my perspective as a frontline staff, I don't know from the administration level, but no one was really comfortable with that name being on there for a while. It's sad that it did take a movement to finally push it through and get it switched over. I'm glad that it's done now, though, to say the least. It definitely should have been done years ago, especially since that health center is not even in Stapleton, it's in Park Hill. Basically, to break down, the reason why the Stapleton name was put on there is because they donated a bunch of money to Planned Parenthood a long time ago. Yeah, so, but now that name's gone. It's now the Park Hill Center, which kudos to, the clinician who like really spearheaded it and like sparked it all. And then like kudos to our whole frontline staff of being passionate about it. Typically our frontline staff is a younger group of people who are really politically involved. I think that was key, that everyone was really getting engaged in what was going on with the Black Lives Matter movement. So I think, just putting the petition out there and just having it being like, it's as easy as signing your name and putting a suggestion for another name and why you want it gone. It was just like a free type petition, but all you have to do is sign it, and then they just forward it on to our HR department.
It's amazing. It went from 16 years to 2 days. And it's
not 16 years. So they said it was brought up in 2016.
Oh, 2016. Okay, so it was brought up.
Yes, I'm sorry.
No worries.
16 is when we were told that they started working on it, but then it just never happened. So that was kind of confusing, infuriating for some of us, but sure. Like we have a lot of people internally, especially in the frontline area, that are very passionate about making good changes, and like totally are the one clinician, like she spearheaded it, and then everyone just got behind her and pushed. It was like a collective effort from the frontline staff. So I'm impressed that we all were like, no, we're doing something now. So yeah, it truly did take one person standing up and being like, I made this petition, let's send it around. So it's like one voice can really make a huge difference.
Yeah. And John, I think you were telling me earlier today actually about how, you were that person in this very corporate environment who, you know, you used your voice, you asked questions, and you kept pushing and asking and, you know, trying to just strip down to the core of what was really going on. And I don't know if you want to just say a
Yeah,
little something about that. Yeah.
absolutely. I was in the corporate world for 9.5 years at a job and made my way into kind of the executive team. And so during that time frame, I took on a department of what would normally just be called a call center environment. And, you know, it's interesting to me, we had a wealthy man as part of our owner. And, you know, I fought because I was the very first gay person that they had ever hired in the company, which I thought was the most bizarre thing in the world. And here I am, rainbows a busting out of everywhere of me. And so then I started volunteering at the center and I was meeting people and I met some beautiful trans folks that were working at our front desk and we started doing job fairs and job readiness. And then I came to the center and we did like this little job fair. And one of my trans friends now applied for the job and they came to me and they were like, well, we're just not really sure whether we're ready to hire a trans person. I was like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, this is a person who needs a job, you know, but it all comes down to perception of, well, we certainly can't put them in front of the client because what will the client say? And I'm like, who cares what I mean, it's a person that needs a job. Like, we need to do better. And so I just kept fighting and fighting. And finally, she got hired and is still with the company. And here we are, you know, this was probably 5.5 years ago. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. We've got to do better. And so at that point in time, that I could just kept pushing. You know, I kept having the conversations of, well, why? Why? You know, because I wanted to know why they were thinking that way. And I know the exact reason why is because they've never been introduced or been around a person that identifies as transgender. And so they've never had that in their circle of friends and people. So I get it, but it's also was my job as the only queer person that I knew of in the organization at the time that I needed to educate them on what it is to hire people, hire human beings. If they're qualified for the job, make them go as far as they can in the interview process and let them do the job. Like it's not that anyone is anything special. It's just that, you know, it's just so bizarre to me that people still think that way. And that was an interesting thing for me too, is to find out that, you know, like 80% of people in the world have never been introduced or have been around a transgender person. That is, I guess now in my world that I work in and that I live in, it just is so bizarre to me. But then I go back to my rural roots in Pennsylvania, and you know, I never even knew a gay person when I was growing up. We had one Black family in my entire town. And that was like the big hoopla back in the 80s. And I was like, what is happening? Like, why does anybody, like, it's a new family. You know, I was young. I didn't, you know, I wasn't taught to hate people. So I didn't have that in my DNA. So it's just bizarre to me that we still live in a world where 80% of us don't have interaction with another human being that, you know, just happens to be transgender. It's like those types of things are just really crazy to me. And so now, you know, unfortunately, 2 days ago, we lost our 23rd victim, Black trans woman, Marilyn Cesares, the 23rd Black transgendered woman this year. Last year, we had that all year long in 2019. I think we had maybe 26 deaths and murders during the year. We're already at 23. And that is just really mind-boggling to me that we still are, you know, I don't know whether it's the pandemic that has thrown everyone off kilter or what's happening, but you know, it's these things that come up and it makes me very worried for not just the United States, but for the world, because it's like, what are we doing? You know, and I find that we need to do more, obviously. And Marvyn, you see it all the time at One Colorado as well. You know, we're trying to fight as much as we can for our Black transgender men and women, and just trying to figure out a way that we can help stop these murders and educating people and offering people to come into a space where they get to meet another transgender person or a transgender person maybe for the first time, and how do you have those topics? So I'm interested on that whole, you know, thing, as well as how do we show up and be better. You know, I am a queer male and I work in the drag industry, and I get this question all the time. You know, I get it all the time, and you know, it's transgender versus drag, and I'm like, it's two very different things. And so my handling of it is just, you know, well, I am playing a character, and this is who I am today. You know, I'm not choosing to live my life like this every single day. And so it's just breaking it down into kind of terminology and speakease that people will understand. And so I'm interested to find out from each of you too, how you talk about that, because I find that we discriminate way more within the queer community against our transgender community as well. And that just is, again, baffling to me. And so I have a lot of friends that I have these discussions with, and sometimes they say to me, well, I just don't get it. And I'm like, what is there to get? It's educate yourself. Educate yourself. Like, do I need to help you? Do I need to Google it for you? Like, just educate yourself. I'm sure that you know people in your life that are transgender, and I bet you any money you love them very much. And so have those conversations. You know, again, they're going to be tough because we have to look within first and against our prejudices that we have. But how do we better communicate that within our own queer community?
And
Sorry,
I think
that
adding
long-winded.
that was a great question, and yeah, thanks for talking about that as well. But yeah, how do we show up? And also, you know, a question from the audience we had is, you know, can you elaborate more on calling people in, and what ways are you able to have those actions during confrontation? And I think that's a really important question, especially speaking about myself, talking about issues with my family that have to do with trans people, and getting so emotionally involved and, you know, being vulnerable when I'm talking about those issues, even before I knew they were my own issues, you know? So yeah, what have you guys experienced with call in, call out culture, and how can we advocate? How can we have our allies advocate better for us? Yeah.
Can I say something real quick about that?
Yeah.
One thing I find we as a community have to be very careful about calling out. So this is something that I've seen a lot within the drag community lately, and people are getting dragged through the mud when it's not always a correct call out. So that is one thing that I would like to caution everybody watching, is because yes, there are those moments to call people out and hold them accountable, but make sure you're getting the correct information, because it's not really fair to the person that you're calling out if you're giving very wrong information, and it can hurt them personally and professionally, not only just within the job that they do as an entertainer or at their job at work or anything of this nature. It's like, let's have the facts first and not just like third party kind of communication. So that's all I'll say on that.
In regards to like cancel culture and calling in versus calling out, I think they all have their place. But I think it's kind of a tiered process in my mind. Like, you know, if it's a friend, trusted friend, you know, they're not intending to do something. It's, you know, they're not intending to be racist, but like, you know, calling them in first and like having a conversation about, well, you know, saying colorblind stuff, like this is how it's problematic. And then, you know, if that is the end of the conversation, they're like, oh, thanks for telling me, you know, blah, blah, that's the end. But sometimes I do think calling out is necessary. I think cancel culture can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But I think there are scenarios where call outs are appropriate. But to try and start with the calling in, I think is important.
Thank you. Yeah, that's very important, I would say.
Yeah, to say on that, I'm from rural Illinois, so about a town of like 600 people. I was the only queer person that I know of from there, and also the only trans person that I know of from there. So I would a lot of times see people posting things, and instead of like commenting on it in public and being like, this is racist, I would send them a private message and be like, hey, I saw that you post that. I'm curious on why you think that way. And hopefully they would give me an explanation, you know, a dialogue back, have a conversation like, well, I understand why you think that way, but let's break down why that's not okay. And hopefully they'd be out like open to listening, because if you meet someone who thinks that they're right, and sometimes they don't know that they're wrong because of how they've been raised or what their culture they're around, and you meet them with aggression, they're not going to be opening to like hearing the resolution. You know, like, how do you feel when someone's angry with you and comes at you? You shut down. Your ears aren't open to hearing why things are wrong and like how you can better yourself, or how you can like kind of change your thought pattern of thinking. And I just found out I have been someone who has been aggressive before and like call people out, and I definitely regret it, because I feel like I missed opportunities to educate somebody and make not only them a better person, but also make myself a better person for doing it. Kind of like giving a give and take situation. I found, especially with trans issues, very personal to me. I get fired up really quickly. I found out taking, you know, a step away before immediately reacting helps me also be calmer about it and be able to rationalize a better explanation on why it's not okay. I know it's easy on the internet to like see something and immediately be like, hey, this is blah, blah, blah. But it's like, it takes a lot of patience sometimes, especially when it's a personal thing, to really like take a moment to yourself and like realize this person isn't trying to personally attack you, even though they are. That's not, they don't know you. They don't know who's behind the screen. They don't know who's seeing this. So like, take a step back and remove yourself. It's very hard. I don't always do it. I definitely slip up sometimes and I get aggressive with folks, which I totally regret and I always end up apologizing for. But yeah, it's a hard balance, I feel like, especially as white queers. Like I don't know, I've seen a lot of other queer people in my community post stuff about like all lives matter and stuff like that. And I'm just like, how are you like this when the people who fought for your rights were Black trans women? Yeah. But also I have to realize not everyone knows that.
Right.
Our history wasn't taught, you know? So that's also another thing where I've tried to step back and like send people resources so that they can educate themselves instead of me doing a whole long conversation. I'm like, hey, you should watch this. Things like that sorts. I feel like it's able to create a dialogue rather than to create an argument.
Absolutely. Education is key when it comes to our own community. Last year, we did a beautiful exhibit called Stonewall 50 at the center. And so people can go online and still look at it. And it gives every bit of history, not just what happened in New York, but also the movement here within the city of Denver and the state of Colorado and how it got started and where it came from. So I encourage people, especially within our queer community, to get educated and, you know, do some research and find out about what happened and how we got to where we are today.
Yeah, and so sorry I have to leave early. There's a like meeting with the city about that East area plan, so I gotta go in a few. But you know, the overlap of Zooms. But I think one thing I've just been thinking about, kind of underlying this conversation, is like, while words are very important, I think what's more important, or what is necessary, is actions. And you know, a lot of people don't want to be told what to do, you know, or like don't want the verbal thing because they take it as like superiority, moral superiority, whatever. And so just like really going within and thinking like, how am I showing up? What am I doing to be a model for others, you know? And like, also if someone does call you out, like learning to not be defensive, and like Denym was saying, like learning to keep one's emotions in check. And even if it's like, hey, you know, I need some time. Yeah, like I'll get back to you in a few hours tomorrow, you know, just like letting the person know you hear them, but you need to calm down a little bit, you know.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's really important. It's really this very strong parallel in a way. I say, you know, intersectionality, you know, it's like a prism, you know, it shows you the different ways that other populations are marginalized, silenced, oppressed, and all of that stuff. And I think, you know, just the same as, I know last week on our chat, we talked about this with pronouns and going by they, them. It's just the same as when someone misgenders you, and, you know, if you don't say anything, if you feel uncomfortable or you don't speak up, which, you know, I know that was me a lot of the time before I was more confident and comfortable with who I am and going by they, them pronouns. And I think it's the same thing. I mean, I know it's the same thing with racism and stepping up and calling it out. And, you know, when you look at, you know, your friend, whether they are, like, let's say you have a Black friend who just witnessed hearing something said to them that was just a super microaggression and just not cool to say, you know, that feels really shitty for them, you know. And so what we can do is we can step up and we can say something, and in that moment, stepping up is the same way for stepping up for your friends who go by different pronouns, you know. And that's why it's so important that you tell your friends and your allies and the people around you, and also that you're listening to the other people around you telling you the same things, is, you know, how can you better support people, and how can you use the language that they've showed you or taught you or said that you can say to, you know, help talk about that population. But
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
Because we're running out of time, I'm going to skip to our next question, and we'll make it our last question.
Right on.
So I'm interested to know from everybody what it is personally that you think that our community needs to do.
I think the queer community needs to center the most marginalized voices, and that's Black and brown and Indigenous women of color. I think throughout the history of LGBTQ rights, too often it's paralleled, you know, other movements where it's like, you know, let us go first and then you can follow behind and we'll be fighting for you after we get our rights. And you know, I think we saw that with marriage equality, how it was very much the priority of the movement, but so many folks were not positively impacted by marriage equality in the LGBTQ community, specifically the queer community. And so I think that hopefully that we're learning a lesson this year to center marginalized voices. And then when we lift those voices up and when we get rights for the most marginalized among us, then we are all lifted up and we all have those rights. But, you know, we're not going to get there anymore, leaving people behind.
No. Yeah. Thank you for that.
I was gonna say, oh, sorry, you go ahead, Blair, since you're leaving.
Okay. So I have to leave, but I think something I've been learning with like George Floyd things and since is that, especially during a global pandemic, there are lots and lots of different roles in the move to racial justice, the movement. And I think, you know, especially right now, you have immunocompromised people that can't take to the streets. And folks that are dating immunocompromised folks. So like, you know, they're grant writing, for instance, one can do from home. There are a lot of things one can do from home or remotely that aren't taking to the streets. So I think, yeah, my answer is more of a general, like, look into all the roles of activism and like really dig into yourself to see where your strengths lie or where, you know, what you want to learn about. I know that, like, for instance, like taking to the streets, like medics are needed, getting training on how to be a street medic, and, you know, as a white body, put yourself in the middle of things. And then also a friend mentioned mental health things during protests. And I think that's really important to think about because, you know, the cops can really escalate things. And so, yeah, just like there are lots of roles for us in this movement.
wonderful. Thank you.
Denym, did you have something?
Oh yeah, I was gonna say 100% agree with you, Marvin. Yes. Another thing I would like to see in the queer community is just like showing up. I feel like, you know, Denver has a very big queer community if we're talking about local. I'm gonna say majority of us are white, that I see at least visible in the public. And I feel like with our local stuff, you know, like out front, things like that, we need to start making those voices up front. They need to be the center of attention. Like they need to be more visible. They need to be there, they need to be heard, and not just heard, but like have people listening who want to be able to make change and actually hear how they can make change by listening to them. I just feel like right now in the queer community, I know we're trying and we're making efforts, but I don't feel like the efforts are there yet. I want to see, you know, out front magazines having a Black trans woman on the cover the next 5 years. I want to have them have a feature story on a Black queer person, Indigenous queer person. Like where are more of these people? They're here, and they just need to be heard. They need to be out there, and they need to be found. And it's not their job to search for our help. We need to search for them. We need to go find them and be like, hey, we want to put you on the front of the magazine. You know, it's because it's hard to advocate for yourself when you're in that position. I've done it too, you know. Like Kai said, when someone misgenders me, I used to not say anything. Sometimes it depends on where I'm at, depending on safety. But it's like, you can't really advocate for yourself because you're put in this awkward, scary situations. So we need to start advocating for them and pulling them forward. That's what I would really like to see more in the community.
I love that so much. And that's the thing where we need to get to a place where we hold each other accountable and we start seeking out people. I make this challenge all the time when I do virtual shows. It's like I challenge everybody to find someone that's not like you this week, or to learn about somebody within our queer community that has been part of our great movement that is a Black trans woman. You know, find these people. We have Google people. It's not, you know, we can locate these things. It's not as, you know, we're not flipping through the yellow pages anymore. You know, we can go find these Black and, you know, queer owned businesses and support them 100% and let them know that we're showing up. But I really feel that it's time for all of us as white queer folks within the city of Denver to start advocating for those people that don't have a voice.
Absolutely. And, you know, just kind of adding on to that, it's not only the queer community's responsibility to help each other within our community, it's also, you know, that's telling our allies, anyone who's watching right now, is, you know, stick up for us, stick up for other queer folks in your lives, you know, and let's all hold each other accountable, just as you said, John. And I think with that too, there's such a big aspect of community, and, you know, don't be afraid to reach out and follow each other on Instagram, you know, add each other on LinkedIn, connect and network. And I think that the more that we're doing that on a local, small level, you know, the more opportunities we have to give other queers, you know, a chance to succeed and have an opportunity that brings them success within their company, their professional lives, you know, seeing visibility and meeting other people, you know, that identify similarly, and yeah, and just talking to each other and supporting each other and shouting each other out, just like Denym. You know, I have actually literally my entire apartment is decorated with all of Denym's artwork. I'm such a huge fan, you know. But there's also Gabby Rechny, who is working on this docu-series. She's tagged in the Instagram post on Fireside. Go follow her, check out her page too. She's incredible, an incredible photographer, and yeah, doing this docu-series on trans women. And so yeah, with that said, thank you everyone, and definitely stay tuned. We're going to be sharing on Fireside social media a few clips from all of our series, and it's crazy to think this is the last chat, but no, I'm so glad you guys could be a part of it. Yeah. And we'll be posting resources, links, all the panelists from all of our different chats, and yeah, also the notes from this conversation and every other one. Yeah.
Awesome.
So thank you everyone for joining, and have a great night.
Thank you all so much.